All right, awesome. Well, hey, if you are, I know Lindsay's already welcomed you here. If you're here at Epic for the first time ever, thrilled that you're here. And here's why I'm thrilled that you're here. I want you to know that we believe that we're really in this unique season where God's doing some special things in our church. And that's not just lip service. I really believe that. You can talk to any of our leaders and people that have been a part of this scene for a little while now, or even just this year. So I'm glad that you're here. And I'm also glad you're here specifically, not just in the season that we're in, but that you're here today. This will, I think, go down as one of the most unique days in the short history of Epic Church. I hope that you feel the same by the time that you walk out of this room in a good way. Unique doesn't always mean good, but hopefully in today's understanding and how we define unique, I hope that you leave with hey, this is a good thing. But if you're here for the first time, I want to let you know what we've been doing for the last 5 weeks. We've been in this series called One Life, where we've been looking at the scriptures, at the life of Moses, and it's been a purpose series, meaning that we've been trying to look at Moses' life and his experience and his journey, what God did in his life, and asking ourselves some questions. And we've discovered a few things as a church. I'll catch you up on that and then tell you what's going on the rest of the morning. So we started off by saying that our purpose originates in the heart of God. Here's what we mean by that. But before you and I ever have a purpose downloaded to our heart, God has a purpose. So if he sends you to do something, it's not just that he wants you to do something first. It's that first he just wants that general thing or specific thing to be done. So we begin. So before it ever comes to me as sort of what you might call a calling or what you might call a purpose or what you may say is the vision for your life, before it ever comes to our hearts, what's going on is that it's beating in the heart of God. And isn't that good that his purpose, it starts there and then it comes to us. It gets transferred to us. And through this series, we've said when you accomplish God's purpose or seek to accomplish God's purpose, there's a part for you to play, and thankfully, there's a part for God to play. Now, we try to play his part sometimes, don't we? How is that working out for everyone in the room? Now, I know you're awesome and you're brilliant and you're super spiritual and you've been doing the Jesus thing for a long time, but typically what we have to come to understand is that there are some days, we've said, that only God's the one who goes to work in certain seasons. You come up to this maximum, you're like your maximum or your limits, and you realize, wait, if we're going to go beyond this, I really need God to show up. So we talked about that. And we said that last week that oftentimes we're reluctant to move forward into some new purpose God gives us because we don't feel like we have enough. Right? In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus said, hey, pray for your daily bread. And anybody ever recited the Lord's Prayer? Anybody ever, ever read it? Most of us have. But when we say, God, give me my daily bread, what most of us, at least what I've meant in the past, is, God, give me my decades worth of bread, right? We're not content. If God were to say to us this morning, hey, I want to give you enough, and then he gives us enough, what many of us are prone to do in that moment is say, God, I think you're missing something. That's not enough for 2 months from now, for 2 years. But what God wants to do so that we might trust him, as Brad prayed in his prayer a second ago, he wants to light the way just enough. So we'll take that step. And when we take that step, he opens up other steps in how we accomplish and pursue his purpose for our lives. Well, today what I want to do is push the pause button on the One Life series because of an exciting new opportunity that has just been presented in the recent days and weeks to our church. And so you guys are all for hearing about exciting new opportunities, aren't you? Yeah, well, let's get there. Before we get there, I want to just remind you where we've been. Some of you need to hear where we've been for the first time, how this thing kind of took off. In the summer of 2010, about 17 of us gathered in my living room in what we called launch team meetings. So that's June 6, I believe, 2010. There were 4 of the 17 not in that picture. The Kills, our worship leader, and his family had not moved yet. I've got quite the sunburn that afternoon, and that was one of those 90-degree days, seriously. And I'm holding my 2-year-old at the time, who's now 6 years old and in kindergarten, which is crazy to think about. But here's what those Sunday nights were comprised of. We would gather in our living room. We would plan for and dream about and pray towards what it would mean to start a church in the Soma neighborhood in the heart of San Francisco. And to be honest, some of those nights I was like, is it always going to be 17 of us? So thanks for that, first of all. My insecurities are pushed away. And on February 13th, 2011, 6 or 8 months later, we launched this church that we're now a part of called Epic Church. in the W Hotel at the corner of 3rd and Howard. That's where it all began. And there's a picture from the W days. But we hadn't been at the W long, though it was a good experience. We hadn't been there long when we came to realize that we probably weren't going to be able to be there forever. It was a great environment. It was a great space, but they weren't willing to give us this assured contract. And so we kind of got into every week. One Saturday at 3:45, I got a call, "Hey, Ben, you guys won't have any children's space tomorrow. Another company offered us more money than your children can afford." And so... then you're willing to pay us. So it's like, we're kind of like suckers, It's like, we got this dumb church down the street. They'll give us a couple $1,000s a Sunday. But if we get a better deal from Google or anybody else, well, here you go. And so that's really how it played out. And so we started thinking, okay, we might need to look for something else. And so on a Sunday night in March 2011 as well, in that same living room you just saw, around 25 of us got together and began to pray about, God, would you provide a new space for us? Really thought it would be a setup and tear down space, just like the W was, because I thought that's what we would be in for maybe 10 years. And I know I have some church planning friends who are still in set up and tear down phase a decade later in other cities that aren't even seemingly as difficult to find space in as San Francisco is. But out of the people that were there that night, we got some great ideas that night. We got some terrible ideas that night. But not looking at you, I'm just saying, generally, we got some bad ideas that night. But what was really cool that night is there was a young man who had obviously been a part of our church for a month, because that's all any of us had been a part of the church for. And he happened to be a broker for a real estate group here in the city, and he began to show Tim and I, our executive pastor, he began to show us space, and we're like, oh boy, can we do this? And so we began to negotiate the space that we're in June, and through some crazy circumstances, God gave us the space in August of 2011. And the reason it was crazy, A, our church was 6 months old, and B, we were averaging, in the month we started negotiating, we were averaging 107 people, which was great, but that was actually the lowest. So we had launched the church, and things kind of had gone down attendance-wise at least. So we have 107 people coming. We need new space. This comes into our prayer situation. And it was one of those only God moments that we'll talk about some more today, where God, if you've got to do this. I can't make this happen, And so we moved in August 21st, 2011 was our first service in this room that we're in today. And trying to think, since that day, our church really has grown in all kinds of ways. It's been quite a journey since we moved into that space. In this room alone, last year, 2013, we baptized 40 people right over here to my left. That's where our baptism space is. 38 of those were adults, which is just awesome. People saying, hey, Christ has changed my life. I want to identify with him through baptism. Maybe that's a step you'll need to take soon. We currently have over 310 people involved in small groups for this session. We have over 50 kids now attending Epic every single Sunday in downtown San Francisco, which all the things we heard about kids and families before we moved here, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe it'll just be our kids. Thankfully, to all of you and to God, it's not. And so that's been really, really cool to see. We have over 250 volunteers that serve at Epic every single month, 80 to 90 every single Sunday. When you think about the band, 3 hours of kids' rooms, 9 total kids' rooms, hospitality team, people that are working the production group in the back. And these people are getting here at 7 a.m., not leaving until after 1. And so that's been really cool. And many of you know that on January 26th, we added a third Sunday morning service. And since we've done that, our church's attendance on average has been over 400 people. And what's really cool is over the last 2 weeks have been our highest non-Easter attendances ever. So 2 weeks ago, 438, last week, 436, which has been really cool. And we have so much to be thankful to God for all that he's done in the 3+ years since this thing started. People often ask me, like, Ben, did you think, I don't know what your expectations were. Did you think, is it as good as you thought it would be? Is it worse than you thought it would be? And the only thing I can really say is that we're blown away. I don't know that I ever thought we would see even this, much less just this in this room. Look around, like representing one service. So you guys can probably tell our capacity issue might have something to do with what we're talking about in just a moment. But we have so much to be thankful for. And what's happened all along the way is that we've come to this place where it was an only God moment. And here's what I mean by that. I don't think laziness is ever what God wants from us. I think he wants faithfulness. But we come to this fork in the road. We come to this part in the path, the journey of what God has for us. And we just have to stop and go, God, this is one of those things that you have to make happen. Not in a demanding way, but we're just saying, God, you know what real estate's like here. You know what it's like. You know that 80% of all church plants fail. That number goes up when you talk about an urban setting like San Francisco, okay? And we can talk those stats later. And so, like, God, we need you to do this. And we've had many of those moments. There are a couple of verses that we've clung to really since the beginning or even before the beginning that I would love to show you this morning. If you have a Bible, Psalm 127. If you need a Bible, raise your hand, and we've got you ready. We are ready to give you a Bible. This is yours to keep. Psalm 127, page 333 in the Bibles that are being gifted out. And everyone, the guys in the back, they're not bringing more chairs in just for effect, okay? It's like, because we really need them, and for whatever reason, no one wants the artist circle seats. This is not a spitting day, okay? You can trust me. You can trust me. Let's stand up and read this together. Psalm 127, verses 1 and 2. And I want you to think about adding this, even if you're not a person of faith or you're coming back to faith or even you have huge hang-ups about the whole Jesus faith thing in general, what if you just began praying these two verses and not just praying them, but resting in these verses? Here's what he says in Psalm 127, 1 and 2. He says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Before you sit down, lock eyes with me right here. Here's what he's saying. There are times where you and I get to this place in our marriages, in our work, in our relationships, in our church community, where we have to go, God, unless you do it, I can expend a lot of energy. I can wake up early. I can hit the midnight, burn the midnight oil. I can do all of these things, but in the end, it won't be done unless the Lord builds it, unless the Lord watches it, unless the Lord produces it, unless the Lord provides it, unless the Lord breaks through. There are just going to be places in our experiences in life where we're not going to be able to push through, and so he's got to do it. Have a seat. And we've hit so many of these moments, and what he's essentially saying, the psalmist is saying that, like, if God doesn't show up, this thing really is impossible. If God doesn't act, if there's no divine activity from God, then there are certain things you will not be able, and I will not, and we will not be able to produce on our own. So you get to these moments, but here's the thing. The opposite of this is true as well. What if God does show up? What if God does pour favor over a marriage, over a church, over your family, over your work? What if God does show up? What if he does act on our behalf? What if the God who has all authority and can bring the world into existence, what if this God can bring anything else into existence? My guess is everything could change. My guess is that if this God were to show up, if he were to act, if his divine presence were to enter into a situation, my guess is that anything might become possible. And that's really what God has done in our midst. Over the last several months, for myself as the pastor here, for our staff, as well as for our board of directors, a few things have become really clear to us. One is the growth rate that the church is growing at right now. Two is the fact that our lease on the space that we're in this morning is up August 31st this year. So, it's time to ask a question, right? What's next? What's next? Anybody want to know? Anybody want to know? Come on, I know. Listen, you play it cool. Yeah, don't be the begging type. I'll just sit here because I know I don't need. Like I'm in. After much prayer and months of searching, we believe God has led us to a new church home. If this is a TV show, we're going to commercial right now, right? One of those 3-minute ones that you love. Like, what's going on next? Back from commercial. After much prayer and months of searching, we believe that God has led Epic Church to our new church home located at 731 Market Street between 3rd and 4th Street. Now I realize, I'm telling myself I'm wanting Ben, they're hearing it for the first time. Ben, they're hearing this for the first time. So I'm just telling myself that, okay? So I don't even need to watch your reactions, actually. I know you're trying to place, like, where is that? So let's look at the map. 731 Market, it is between 3rd and 4th Street. So it's a little closer to 3rd. 4th is not even on the map that you're looking at on the screen. So 731 Market is right there. We will be in the lower level space there just like we are here, but I've got news for you. For those of you that have a problem with that, hold on. Just hang tight. We're steps really from Old Navy's just down this way. So the Powell Street BART station, the entrance from this side is just right over here. So your steps from the Powell Street BART station. There's a Super Duper over here, if that means anything to anybody. Just wait till I tell you about our other entrance. Union Square is just, if we had a map was up here, Union Square is just across the way, like right there. And so it's this great location. And the biggest thing is that we get to stay in Soma. It's huge for us. It's a vision for our church to be in Soma. And as Tim and I began to meet with brokers and those sort of things, we didn't know if we could even stay here, but if we could, we would have to go to 4th, 5th, and 6th services at non-optimal times. Or we thought to get a bigger space, we might have to go outside of Soma. We've been looking for months and months and months. And this one really is, and I'll tell you more about it in a minute. It's really an only God moment. But what I love is we aren't going to have a front door and a back door in the new space. We're going to have 2 front doors. Okay? So if I ever call it the back door, if you ever hear anybody call it the back door, no, it's just the other front door. And the other front door will be located on Stevenson right here. And actually, unless you're riding BART or Muni, it will probably be the preferred. It's going to be what they're calling the grand entrance, and I'll show you more about that in just a moment. So Stevenson's right here, 4 Seasons. So when you come out of Stevenson doors, 4 Seasons is all right here. Right over here is the Contemporary Jewish Museum, if that helps you place this thing. And when you come out of our doors, just across Mission Street is the Yerba Buena area where we're going to be today. So all of that lawn, the Metreon, the Target, everybody, come on, shake your head if you know where I'm at. Like, oh, it's a building between 1st and 2nd on Howard. It's a high-rise. Anyway. But Stevenson's going to be the grand entrance. And what we're going to have, I forgot to tell the first service this. Be glad you didn't come to service 1. We're going to have, for the first time ever, permanent signage on the building on the Stevenson side with the Epic SF logo, which is huge. So you've got thousands of people walking through there. Another thing that's huge is out the doors of Stevenson, tons of great food places that are open on Sunday. And some of you spiritual people are like, who cares? We're just here for Jesus. Listen, Jesus is providing all of these things for us, all right? And he's a good God. So not only is there a super duper on Market, there's one on the back side of the Metreon. So you're going to be covered. Whatever door you come in and out, you're absolutely going to be covered. Is that great courtyard area there? So there's just going to be great natural gathering spaces for our church coming in and out of our services. And here's what's really, really neat. So how many? And I want you to keep your hands up as I progress along this question. How many of you walk to church? Keep them up. How many of you ride a bike to church? Keep them up. Keep them up. If you're a walker, you ride a bike, motorcycle. Because I know that's different things for different people. Keep them up if you're like we're going cumulative here. If you ride the BART, raise your hand. If you ride a Muni, train, or bus, raise your hand. If you drive to church, raise your hand. Who's taking the ferry? Here's what's awesome. It's going to be ideal no matter which of those things you just said yes to. So if you live in Soma and you walk, perfect. If you live a little further out and you ride a bike or motorcycle, perfect. If you ride Muni or BART, you're going to be steps. Like you're going to have to find exercise elsewhere that you're used to walking to church every Sunday and back. I mean, my Fitbit's telling me I've got to find out other paths, or I've got to get off early. I'm a BART rider myself. So BART and Muni, like the station's just right here, which is awesome. And for those of you that drive, this is so cool. Right outside the Stevenson door, immediately outside the door is the Jesse Square Garage with 442 parking spaces. And a decent Sunday deal, and we're going to try to, Tim's got really sweet words to tell the parking attendants to try to get us a deal that's even better. St. Patrick's Church, we're right behind there, if that makes sense, along the Contemporary Jewish Museum. So it's going to be incredible. Let me show you what the grand entrance from the Stevenson side will look like. So what's really cool, I know many of you pat yourself on the back when you handle the challenge well of finding the worship space when you come in off the street. We try to throw you off. We put you in this elevator one week. We put you in the other elevator the other week. And we're like, no, you can't find us. We're going to raffle off the carpet squares out there that tell you how to get there because it's going to be so obvious. So what's awesome, of course, if you need wheelchair accessibility, there's an elevator close. Strollers, same thing. But for those of you, the majority of our church, when you walk in the glass door, you're immediately in Epic space. Okay? So like you now stand in the lobby essentially, and when you take the last step off of this the stairwell, you are just in the lobby of Epic Church. It's going to be awesome. So we're still not getting windows in the worship room, okay? All of you stained glass fans, we'll get there. But for the first time ever, Epic's going to have a little bit of natural light coming into the lobby, which will be awesome. And so when you step in, you're in the lobby, and let me show you a floor plan to show you the way the rest of this is going to go. So on the far right of the screen is Stevenson. So this stairwell right up here is what I just showed you. So you come in the doors, you're right there. You've got restrooms to the right and left. It looks like the urinal's here, so this is boys, it looks like. Girls right here, a coffee bar back over this way. This is probably 90% finalized right here. Tim and I are still working with, no, we're not the ones drawing it, but we're working with the folks that are. And so you drop into this big, spacious lobby. And for those of you that don't have kids or don't have kids yet, you'll be able to flow just from the lobby straight into the worship space. If you do have children, you'll be able to come, what is right now at least, double doors into this, all the kids' space will be right here, but also from that hallway, you will be able to enter into the worship space. Mom and dads, I need to know that you think that's awesome. Single people, young couples, the fact that you don't have to go through the kids' space to get to church, I need to know that that is awesome. So it's going to be great. But the thing we're really excited about is that we almost double our capacity in our worship space and in kids. So in the kids, there's at least room for 65 kids per hour in our kids space. Awesome. But when you walk in the worship space, if this continues to be the plan, we've got 375 seats in our new worship space there. Yeah. So when you look at kids, when you look at adults combined each hour, so for one service, 435 is the new capacity. For 2 services, 870, and for 3, 1,300 people. Now, some of you leaders that I've shared this with have blown me away because you're like, Ben, what are we doing when we run out of space? I'm like, wow, that is an awesome faith move on your part. I'm just not there yet, but I will be glad. I will be glad to get this is the best I got right now. And then, of course, that's the market side right there. And so it's about 11,000 all good, usable, laid out square feet. We're about 6,500 here where we sit now. And when you think of kids' rooms, the space, lobby, restrooms, that kind of thing. And so that is what is next for Epic Church. Yeah. And I just want to say this publicly. If you come to me and say, Ben, I can't handle the 2 extra blocks to the new church, I've got a prize for you. Just kidding. It's going to be great. And the only God thing for us was really having to ask as a leader the hard questions, because I don't feel like God ever owes us anything. Really having to ask the hard question, hey, do we want to do the 4th and 5th service thing here over the next couple of years? Ben, are you willing to leave Soma? Which that had been just the vision birth from day one. It was not just San Francisco, it was here. And so when I think about the future, I'm all about expanding, but I'm not all about leaving. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, let's go put it other places as God leads us to. Many of you have been a part of churches where they kind of have done the 2nd, 3rd, 20th campus, some of you guys. And we're not against that. In fact, we would be all for that. But I didn't want to have to vacate this home. And I'm talking about the neighborhood here, not just the building. Our vision at Epic, if you need to be reminded or you need to be told the first time, our vision here at Epic is to see an increasing number of people in San Francisco orient their entire lives around Jesus. That's what we're after. That's what we're shooting for. That's what we're preaching. That's what we're creating community for. That's why we're doing missional work in our city and around the world. We're about that. And I believe 100% with all my heart, no lip service here to you. Many of you know me, some of you don't. With all my heart, this is absolutely the right move for us. I'll believe that even if you don't participate in what I'm about to invite you into. Absolutely, this is what's next for Epic Church. Don't say that I've heard an audible voice from God, but as Tim and I and our team has looked and as our board of directors has encouraged us to do this process, just to tell you a little bit, about a month ago, as we were in negotiations on this, a month ago, they came to us and told us there was a gym also looking for the space. And I'm like, come on, a gym can go anywhere. We have this unique use, as they call it. Anyway, we won. I don't know. It's really one of those only God things because we were in 2nd place. I mean, it was really, really clear. And everybody's like, well, what happened in the gym? Like, we don't know. We're spiritual people. Man, we just thank God. I hope he didn't take them out. But, provided a great place that will be ideal for the gym. If that's you, I'm sorry. We were the competition, and God was benevolent towards us. So there's that. When we moved into 543 Howard Street, most of the things you see were already here, so we didn't really have to buy too much. We hung some screens, we bought some chairs, we outfitted some kids' rooms. Very different story where we're going. It is basically a shell where we're going, and so we will need to do a full build-out. What's great about that is that the space is going to be constructed according to our needs and desires as a church, which is awesome. The challenging thing about that is that it's going to take every one of us to make this possibility a reality. Okay? And that's really what this next initiative that I'm about to introduce you to is all about. And what next is our initiative, and you'll hear lots about this starting today, but next is our initiative whereby we will we'll come up with the resources necessary to move into and to renovate this new space. The total associated cost with this move into and renovating the space is just over $1.3 million. It's always fun to just kind of see reactions at this place. Because when I tell my family back in other places in the U.S., they're like, "Are you serious?" And then other people that are like in the market are like, "Man, that is awesome." And anyway, that is awesome. If you don't know, if you haven't bought a house recently, I haven't, but I've been doing this process for a while. This is an incredible deal. Here's what that money covers. That money covers construction costs, and thankfully, ownership's going to pay for a really good portion of that. It covers construction costs. It covers a hefty down payment. Security deposit deal. It's going to cover like finishes, so they'll do a standard finish like you would for an office or normal tenant, but obviously because we are a unique use, we'll have to pay extra for some finishes. It's going to include equipment, obviously a lot of AV stuff, audio, video, obviously a couple hundred more chairs and kid space and outfitting a lobby that's not 2 inches wide, but like a little bit bigger. So that's where we are. In addition to that, it will also cover supplementing our lease payments for the first 3 years until we're back into the right proportion ratio of facility part of the budget to the entire budget. And that's really with conservative growth that will be there by year 4. That's if we actually, even if we regress a little bit, we should still fairly easily attain that percentage ratio. And so that's what's going on. Here's how this is going to go. For those of you that are part of Epic, for those of you that are like, this is my church home, this is my community, this is my place, if you want to say that I'm your boy, whatever it is that you say, when you claim this place. For those of us, here's what's going to happen. We'll talk about this for the next few weeks. I'm going to ask you today, though, to start praying about what you would be willing to give towards the next initiative. And on April 13th, we'll have normal worship services, 3 of them, just like we do every week. And at the end of my message, I'll ask myself and all of you who are part of this church to bring a one-time gift on April 13th. In addition to that, a 3-year pledge commitment towards what you will give monthly or annually, if you're one of those big ballers, what you would be willing to give. And all of this, of course, in addition to what we regularly give to Epic. We're still going to make the ministry of the church go on. And so that's what's before us. And you'll hear more about this. You'll receive a newsletter if we have a good address on you. If not, we'll give you one next week when you come in. But that's where we're headed with all this. So we know, and we teach here at Epic, that consistent proportional giving is something that followers of Jesus practice. Right? We're always growing in this, trying to become more generous and realizing we have to lose some insecurities and lose this idea of scarcity. But this is the common practice and an ongoing practice for those of us who follow Jesus. But we also see in the scriptures that there are times where there's these special, unique seasons and opportunities for this special giving. A couple prominent ones, probably the most 2 prominent in the scriptures, are for the building of the tabernacle and for the building of the temple. In addition, even here at Epic, in our own history, you know that we do this once a year, right, through the Hope Project. So every mid-November through the end of January, we give to strategic partnerships in our city, our nation, and in our world. And so that's what this is. I want to show you one verse from 1 Chronicles 29, verse 9. It'll be on the screen. No worries about turning there, trying to find that necessarily. But this is when the temple was being built and the people came, and I just want you to notice, and I want to notice with you, the adjectives and the verbs used, and adverbs even, in this one verse. Here's what it says about this opportunity for them. It says, "Then the people rejoiced because they had given willingly, for with a whole heart they had offered freely to the Lord. David the king also rejoiced greatly." When I look at my kids and when I think about my own maturation process, when I look back, there were days in my life, I'm assuming yours too, where the only time joy came is when I received something. Anybody else? And don't raise your hand if you're still like that, because I'm trying to prove a different point. But really, that was me. It was like, what do I get out of this? But that's not what was happening for these guys. Listen to these. It says that they rejoiced because they had given. Seems like an oxymoron, but rejoiced because they had given. They gave willingly, not under coercion, is how Paul would say it in 2 Corinthians. They gave with a whole heart, and they offered freely. 5 years ago, I began to make an ask similar to the one that I'm making to you this morning, and here's how it went. I would call people, email people. I would drive and fly across the country to present what I call my prospectus, my business plan for Epic Church. And I would sit with pastors and churches and individuals, and I would say, hey, I feel like God's called me to start this church in San Francisco, and I know that most church, like 80% of church plants fail. I know that, but let's keep going. And I believe that God's given me a vision, so I'm moving out there with my wife, thankfully, right? And my 2, 4, and 6-year-old sons. We're moving out there, and there's a team of families coming with us, and an individual as well, and we are just going to go for it. We believe that God's put this on our hearts. And so I said, would you be willing to partner with us for the first 3 years to get this church off the ground before there's any beautiful people sitting in the room? And what blew me away is that they gave over $1 million to see this church start. Now, it didn't blow me away simply that it was $1 million, though that was hard for me to get my little mind around. It blew me away that they gave over $1 million to a church that did not yet exist and to a church still that 95% of them have never stepped foot in. Aren't you glad they did? Aren't you glad they paid it forward? Not knowing, listen, I try to talk a good game, right? But I'm like, there's no guarantees that this will work. We're just going to go for it. We believe God's leading us to this. And what would it be like if they could be in this room, right over in this corner, just looking at you? What would it be like if they could hear the story that you've told me about how your marriage has been changed, how your family was going to be here for a short term, but you've decided to stay here much longer? By the way, we're signing a 10-year lease to make a long-term commitment in the Soma neighborhood. You're like, Ben, how long is that? It's hard for me to judge. Well, I have a 10-year-old son, and the lease expires on his birthday, on his 21st birthday. And then we have a 5-year option. You better definitely be out of the house by the time that 5-year option's come to, you know? Hey, listen, boy. That's awesome. I've got a tip jar somewhere. We're making a long-term commitment here. But I wonder if those people that paid it forward, and they gave sacrificially. It wasn't like some of them were wealthy, lots of them were churches, but like friends and family who just said, hey, we believe in that. Tim had family members who paid so he wouldn't have to get another job. Lindsay had a college students paid for Lindsay's first year out here. College students. And if they could see now, I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of them, thousands when you talk about the church representative, they could just look and go, wow. So I want you and I to say it's our turn to pay it forward. Not just because we're going to move into a cool new space, though I am already thinking like, oh, I won't be able to sleep the night before. This is going to be awesome. But for the hundreds, my guess, honestly, thousands of people who over the next decade will walk in those doors I just showed you and have their lives transformed. And I don't know if it'll be this life or the one to come where they will give you this huge, fat thanks. But it'll be there. And I hope you will just receive this invitation, yes, from me, but from God more importantly. As I say up here a lot of Sundays, I think God's going to do this. I don't know if we'll all respond with a yes when he invites us into our part. But for your sake and for the sake of those who've yet to hear and yet to see and yet to experience, let's pay it forward for them. Let's go there. Listen, I want us to respond enthusiastically and generously and sacrificially. Shauna and I, we've been thinking about this for a few weeks now, and it's like, hey, you know what? If we do this, the number that we chose to give towards this project, I said to her, and she knows this, like, if we do this, we have a few other dreams and hopes, and we're like, hey, at the very least, these are going to have to be put off. And the amazing woman that she is, without coercion, she said, that's okay. Let's do it. So it is a sacrifice for us. We're all at different places, so I will never say, hey, let's all bring equal gifts. Let's bring equal sacrifice. Let's bring equal generosity. What that is for you is different from me and the person sitting beside you. Today, when you leave, you're going to receive, you can call it a wristband, guys, or ladies, a bracelet. It just says 2 words on it. It says, what's next, ? And what I want you to do, if you're not too cool, is just to wear this over the next 30 days or so. Yeah, this new style that's going to take off, but more than that, just as a reminder for you and I to pray, daily for this. This is the huge thing. The consultant who's working with us has said he's never done one in this short of a time frame. At least it'll be over quick, right? I mean, and I really want you to pray this simple prayer. God, what's next for me? As you think about what you would be willing to give to what we're doing here. And on April 13th, I'll ask you to bring your one-time gift. We'll just kind of respond after the message. The band will be up here. There'll be a table over this way, and we'll just all, including me, we'll just bring our commitment, a one-time gift in the envelope, as well as saying what we're willing to do over the next 3 years. And that process will begin May 1st. And so for me, it's like I had I'm dipping into savings for this one-time gift, and I'm more of a monthly guy. And so we'll do the monthly thing as a Pilgreens. All of us are in different places, so you'll have an opportunity to respond that way. And I think the best is yet to come. I think this is absolutely right. I realize you've got difficult thoughts to think through and challenging conversations to have with maybe family or spouse. And so I've been doing this for 4 weeks, and I realize you're just now hearing it. But I want you to pray. Pray through this with us. Let's see what God might do. And all I can tell you is this. I don't want to get to the next decade and look back and go, man, I could have played a significant part, but I chose not to respond. If you're part of this church, I hope you'll have the same thoughts and response. Let's pray. The band's going to come up and lead us in a response song. But I want you to pray with me, A, a prayer of thanksgiving, and B, a prayer of commitment. And you know this. One of the scariest prayers we can pray is like, God, I'm willing to do whatever it is you want me to do. We've been talking about this enough principle and daily bread, and now we get to say, do we trust him as a church? If you're new to Epic, or you're just like, you know what, I am not sure this is the church home for me yet, listen, we just want you to keep attending as you feel led to, and when you want to jump in, jump in. We're willing to pay it forward on your behalf and the behalf of what we think are going to be thousands of others in this great city. God, we believe that unless you do this, this can't get done. God, unless you open this space, I don't think we could have found it. You know, we tried our hardest, God, and I just thank you that you've opened this up. God, I thank you for what you have done in our church over the last few months. God, I thank you for all of the people, God, but more than that, all of the stories. God, you are doing so much to shape us and to transform us and to allow us to be a church that lives for the glory of Jesus, but lives for the impact of its neighbors and its city and its world. God, I pray that this would become even more true as we step out in faith. God, I pray that you would give us a real sense of what our part in this is, God, and we would not do any more or any less than what you have for each of us, God. Oh, God, I pray this would be a thing for our church where we have this maximum participation, each according to our unique abilities and resources. And God, now I just pray for the hundreds and thousands of people, I think, who will be impacted over what you do and what these people in this room do with your strength over the next decade. God, Paul said to the Ephesians, and now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we can ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus forever and ever, amen, for all generations. God, there are babies that are not born yet. There are people who have not gotten jobs yet. There are marriages that haven't been committed to yet that will be in the next 10 years. God, may we be a church for them. God, may what you do in our church in this decade, God, may it lead us to being able to, in 1 year of those 10 years, God, to be able to give $1 million to causes outside of our church. God, I thank you that when we come to an only God moment, this is where you seem to show up most, and we just raise our hands to you and say, God, we're willing to pitch in, but we cannot do what only you can do. So God, would you do it? Would you guys join me? Let's stand and let's respond to the God who's inviting us in.